Good evening, guys. Welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Potential. My name is Greg Riley. I've got a brilliant guest for me tonight. It's someone I've been wanting to hear for a while because she's really good at what she does. She's one of the top psychics in Australia, if not the world, I think. And also, she also has a therapy business, so she gets to blend it really well between the psychic stuff and the therapy side of things. So Tina Newlan, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, I'm excited about this one because I know people are going to get a lot out of this, right? So let's tell us a bit about yourself first and who you are and what you do.
So, Tina Newlan, I work out of the beautiful sunny Gold Coast.
Yeah, I hate you for that. So just stop there, cancel the podcast. No, it's lovely, isn't it?
It's beautiful. Although a bit chilly at the moment. I think it got
chilly.
22 degrees.
22 degrees, that's chilly.
And so I'm a psychotherapist and a clinical hypnotherapist, and I also work as a professional psychic medium. And I started off as just doing psychic work probably about 18 years ago and realised that I needed some therapeutic grounding to be able to help people with the emotional stuff that they were coming to see me with, because I didn't want people walking out of the session feeling worse than when they came in. So about 12 years ago, I started a diploma in hypnotherapy and psychotherapy and did that, qualified, been working as a clinical hypnotherapist and currently going through a psychology degree.
Look, I think that's great because you and I have talked about this quite often about the need to complement especially the psychic side of things, because obviously you and I have seen the damage that's happened from people just throwing stuff out there, right? And I think it's fantastic. So what kind of people seek you out? Because you've got the people who seek you out from a psychic perspective that say, tell me where my soulmate is, what's his name, what date is it? And then you got the therapy side. So what kind of people would naturally seek you out?
So there's a real cross section. I was thinking about this, and I have a range from corporate professional clients down to people who have just lost a loved one and going through problems with families and wills and all of that sort of thing, dealing with losing a partner or a parent or a child, and then having to also deal with the family relational stuff. And then the normal of relationship issues. Sometimes it'll be about seeking out relationships or maintaining connections in relationships, or grief around relationships that finish before they're ready to let go. So there's a really broad, different, really vast type of clients that I have. I suppose I would say that every single one of my sessions, though, have an emotional or a therapy context to it. So even if it's a psychic reading, I'm still often doing therapeutic work within that space.
I think that's fantastic because I think the whole fortune telling world's dead, right? I mean, it's just throwing stuff out there and like we said before, predicting certain things. Because for listeners who are listening to this is what you don't get when you go to a normal psychic is understand how the human mind works, and understanding about the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, patterns, beliefs, thoughts, and normal human stuff. And I use a story on that. I make a story up like this. I just say, look, for example, let's just say a girl comes in and she's had abusive relationships before, and the last two previous partners have cheated on her. She doesn't deal with that kind of stuff. She meets a new man. She hasn't dealt with the trust issues. She's going to drag that stuff straight into the new relationship, and she's going to sabotage that from the start, right? Absolutely. Now, that psychic may predicted, I see this guy coming in and all that kind of stuff. That's great.
Yeah.
Hasn't done her any good, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because she hasn't dealt with that.
You've got the intergenerational stuff. And they're really, I mean, look, the epigenetics and all of the research around that is showing, and even within Indigenous communities, it's showing the intergenerational trauma. But there's stuff that sits in the subconscious. So an example might be, I always say to people that when you come to see me, you don't always hear what you want to hear, but you always hear what you need to hear.
Yeah.
So, people may have, and you're so right with relationships especially, the same patterns seem to happen over and over again. And if they're not resolved at an internal level, then the same thing just keeps repeating. So I think it's really, and I think there's a professional obligation to psychics generally to make people feel better within that space and to be specific. I mean, my thing is, I spend quite a bit of time in sessions sometimes talking to people about what might have happened 15. So they might sit in front of me as an example, and I'll go back to when they were 15 and I'll talk about a trauma that happened in their life. And so that stuff you can't guess.
Yeah.
The reason I go back to past traumas or past experiences is because there'll be something in there that impacts their functioning in life in today's present day context. And I think that's something that psychics have to be aware of. They have to be aware that there's a professional obligation and an ethical one, that what they're telling people psychologically doesn't do more harm than good.
And that is probably a really good segue into, that kind of what damage can be done by throwing predictions out there with really no understanding about where that person is psychologically from an emotional point of view, right? So, and it's all fun and games. We tell people what they want to hear, and well, they made that person feel good, and they feel all warm and fuzzy when they leave, but they've given them nothing.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that you make a really good point that people's psychological well-being is at stake here. So I remember years ago when I first started, I had a young girl sit in front of me, and I just said, "Well, look, you feel really nervous, and I don't know why I want to tell you this, but you're not going to pass away at 27." And she burst into tears. And when she was about 18 or 19, she'd seen a psychic in a shopping centre, and they told her that she was going to pass away at 27. And that infuriates me because this poor girl spent a good token of her life worrying about something that actually wasn't going to happen.
No.
And I always say to people, well, for a start, psychically, I ask that the information I get is for my higher good and theirs, and I will never pass over info. I just don't get it.
Yeah.
Not a realm that I care to delve into. And I don't think we're meant to know certain things. So I just think that that's unethical. And
Yeah.
as you say, you don't know if that person has some mental imbalance, a personality disorder, and you may well just push them over the edge.
Yeah, and it's a very big um honor and commitment we've got to our clients to be able to, like you said, do no harm to them before we started here, and at least for the highest purpose. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's actually being really raw
Yeah.
with people and saying, look, I know you've been to C5 psychics before and they've all told you're going to meet someone in October. I'm the one's going to tell you, don't go there.
Yeah, absolutely. Or even saying to people, and I have done this in the past, look, I'm not prepared to do another reading if they've been to see me really, say they want a reading every 3 weeks, or
Yeah.
it will then become, and probably there's been many clients over the years that have become counselling clients because I'm happy to provide counselling and support and emotional support, but not have them sort of every 5 minutes waiting for a psychic reading. It's just, it's a real balancing act
Yeah.
between meetings, people's requests for services and your ethical obligations.
Yeah, and I don't know if I discussed with this with you previously, but I really struggled at the start when and we've done a similar thing. I did my hypnotherapy back in 2009, I think, and my readings have always been a combination of therapy and psychic work and intuition. Right, I really struggled, in the early stages because people were saying to me, that's not what I want. If I wanted a counseling session, I go see a counselor. And it's like, what am I doing here? Because, the clients I was seeing, that was one of the questions on there. What kind of people do you see? Because I was getting a lot of people who wanted the fortune read. And that's how I sort of separate as, it's a bit of fun, it's a bit of fortune. You're going to do this, right? And I struggle with that a lot, is like the expectation coming from other people saying, well, I want this. And it's like, my guides are going, this person doesn't need this shit. This person needs this shit. That's why they're in front of you, is because they need someone to tell them that, hey, stop the pattern, right? What kind of people see you? And did you have the same similar kind of struggles ever around the expectation of fortune telling?
Yeah, absolutely. So I tend to attract clients that probably have more need of psychological support generally. But
Yep.
I have, so for example, one client it said exactly that. I don't want a counselling session. I don't want a therapist. I just want a reading. But same thing, because I wasn't telling her what she wanted to hear. So I ended up offering a refund and finished the session, because sometimes, like as I said, you don't always hear what you want to hear, but you always hear what you need to hear.
Yeah.
And it's just not the right space for them at that time. But it's also one of those things where if people have a bit of a mind block and they're not willing or ready to look at life as it needs to be looked at, they look for that psychic guidance so they can then maybe blame the psychic. Well, you told me that I was going to meet Fred in June and I didn't. And the other thing that I always say to people is timing can be out. In fact, I have a dear friend who tells me that she always adds a year on to what I tell her is going to happen, because time's sort of this construct that we've created.
Yeah.
Energetically, time is sort of a little bit more malleable. And I know that sounds so weird and out there, but it really is. In the concrete terms of a psychic reading, you can be out with that.
Mm.
So it varies. The other thing that I did struggle with early on, I used to say to people, I hated doing health stuff
Yeah.
when people would ask me about health. And it's one of the reasons why I then went and explored sort of the psychology side of it. But I do pick up a lot about health. So, and I will feel it. And, for those listening who think that's a bit weird, but I will feel, even if it's a phone reading, because skeptics will say, oh, psychics just pick up on your body language. Well, when I do a phone reading, one in particular jumps out at me where I went straight to the shoulder, I just started talking, and they just had a shoulder reconstruction.
Mm.
So that stuff jumps out at me a lot, but I will always say to people, go and explore the medical doctors, but I no longer shy away from the medical side of things because it comes through. And often I've had people that have had sort of heart conditions picked up just because I'll say, there's something else going on here. Now, I don't say to them, you're going to have a heart attack in 3 days, but I'll say something's going on here that I think that has been missed or needs exploring. So
Yeah.
the health side's probably the area that gave me the biggest challenge. I certainly, the word, I hate that word fortune telling. In fact, I feel uncomfortable about the word psychic, to be honest. So I use the word professional clairvoyant
Yep.
or clinical hypnotherapist, and I just say I do some weird stuff. Which is, and it's a bit sad, really, because it is the
Yeah.
mainstream of my business. But you will often, I've had someone at a dinner. Um, I was introduced as a psychic, and they literally got up and moved to the other end of the table because they think you can read their mind, or
Yeah.
so, oh, don't tune into me, will you? Or worse still, what can you tell me? And I think, really, I'm here for a barbecue. I don't want to tell you anything.
That's a really, I mean, this is the thing, is that what we actually do in reality and what the persona is from the public are two totally different things, aren't they?
Yeah. And look, I suppose in some ways there's a little bit of mind reading, for one of a bit. And I do it
Yeah.
with my kids. I'll say, to my youngest, go and pick up the socks under your bed. And she'll go, I have. And I'll say, no, you haven't. I can see them. And she just laughs and goes and picks the socks up that are still under the bed. So, but when you work with, say, for example, adolescents with counseling, that actually comes in handy,
Yeah.
because I will know as soon as they sit down that they're self harming or
Yeah.
that they have suicidal ideation and they have not told anyone. So, there's, and I can't actually explain to you how I do that.
Yeah.
People say, well, how do you do? It just pops into my head.
Yeah.
I just know that there's something going on, that there's an incongruence between what they're telling me they're feeling and what they're actually feeling.
Yeah. And I find like I have to educate a lot of people all the times about, no, this is what it's really about.
Yeah.
And we're having a conversation, we went for lunch today, and we're having a conversation with some friends of ours. And I talked about, there's, for example, let's just say you got a guy in front of you who's a musician and he's doing an album, and he's coming to say, is the album going to be really, out there and make it big? And you're going, it ain't going to. But do you have a right to tell that person it isn't going to
Yeah.
work out? Because is that because part of the journey in life is that may open up doors into other areas, right?
Yeah.
And this is the whole thing, is about, do you get everything? Well, no, you don't.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes you get no answers on stuff because that person needs to go through that. And so it's hard when everyone's going, oh, do you know? It's like, no, we don't know everything. Of course we don't, but we know enough for you to be able to move forward in your life that puts you in the right direction, right? So
And the other
it's
thing is things are fluid. They change,
yeah,
especially when it involves other people. I really believe that energy follows intent. And
yeah,
there's a wonderful hypnotherapist and psychologist called Michael Yapko in America. Now he is very big on the sort of the science of psychology and the science of hypnotherapy, which is actually great.
yeah,
But he uses the same words: what we focus on thrives,
yeah,
which is really that energy follows intent. But at the end of the day, sometimes things don't work out for lots of different reasons. But you're right there. It's a fine line between balancing, um, not trying to sort of squash someone's dream,
yes.
and at the same time supporting them and emotionally being there for them as well.
Yeah. So what are some of the biggest blocks when you do see people? What are the common blocks people have when they pop into your office?
So that's an interesting one because change is really complex. So whether it's therapeutically or whether it's in your life situations, but I find that most people tend to be blocked from fear. So
Yep.
it's fear of the ecological check of what happens if I change. So say, for example, if you've got someone who's been married for 40 years, raised children, and find that they're really unhappy, what does that mean for them if they actually start to say to their partner, actually, I don't like the way you treat me like that?
Yep.
Because it's sometimes the change can be more terrifying than the situation they're sitting in.
Yep.
And that can definitely be the case for people that come from trauma backgrounds.
Yeah.
Um, but the other thing, too, is that fear of what other people think of them. And quite often it's really interesting, but it's often our expectations of people that disappoint us. It's not people themselves. And we have this introjected thing where we think we have to be a certain way or be a certain person because of other people's expectations of us.
Yep.
So that sometimes blocks that moving forward. But whilst there's lots of reasons that people get stuck, I would argue that probably the biggest roadblock is fear.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm stunned when every time I see a new client, new coaching client, even, I've got a whiteboard here. I'll pull out for people when they start reading with me. No, Greg, the whiteboard. If you pull that whiteboard out again, I'm going to kill you, right? So I love my whiteboard.
Yeah,
And just the lack of knowledge about what your subconscious mind does and what your conscious mind does, right? I had a young girl in here today, just finished year 12, and I was talked about this, and she's going, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh,
yeah,
Jesus, right?
yeah,
And there's such a gap. I mean, there are so many things. If we could solve a lot of things by just having a part of the education, is that here's how your mind works. Everything's programmed from here in the subconscious mind. This is why things are happening. And
absolutely.
it's just it's disappointing that people just don't have it as a common thing, that we're actually that they know how to do their Instagram feed 50,000 times, but basic human psychology they have no idea about. So that for me is quite disappointing. So
There's a really great book called The Biology of Belief by Dr. Bruce Lipton,
it's
and he
amazing,
is
isn't it?
a cellular biologist, and it's all about those patterns of thoughts. And the other interesting thing, mainly therapeutically, but sometimes psychically, you can say to someone, for example, if I say to them to imagine a roadblock in front of them, see, hear, feel the roadblock sign, and it's stopping you from moving along the highway of life. What does the sign say? And if they say they don't know what the problem is consciously, subconsciously, they will give you an answer.
Yeah.
If you say to them, I feel stuck because, and they answer that, and I feel stuck because my life hasn't gone the way, and my life hasn't gone the way I wanted it to because, and you get them to keep going through that, almost that automatic response, and you will get some really insightful answers.
Yeah.
Or I will say to people, where in the body does that anger fit? Or if it was a color or a shape, what would it be? And they look at you as if you're nuts, but you actually get past the conscious mind and you just go to automatic subconscious replies, and you get some really insightful awareness for them. And it's really interesting, I think, that people are so disconnected from that inner intuition.
Yeah. I mean, I'll go back a step to come forwards in this, because I want to go into the hypnotherapy side of things and about what you're saying just there about asking certain questions and getting deeper and deeper. I mean, I get people to write stuff out, and just writing things out gets them to a point where I have this massive moment because they're seeing it visually for the first time. I am because and they're going, they're all they're all excuses.
Yeah.
And they have this, and I've done nothing. So I'll just ask you to write this stuff out. And they think you're a magician, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, I just asked you to write it out. And they're having these big kind of moments, right? But back to psychic stuff. So if someone's going to get a psychic reading, what would be your recommendation to them before they book a session? And what would be the expectation that that person has when they're going to see a psychic?
So the probably, and look, I'm careful saying this because each psychic works in a very different way. But for me, say personally, if I were to see a psychic, and they asked me for my date of birth, and I've had someone who comes to me said the psychic wanted a photo, a date of birth, and information about how many children they had. Well, you shouldn't have to tell the psychic that information. I would actually, on that note, though, just explain that sometimes too you have the opposite where people come in and they're absolutely closed and they don't want to give any information away. So you will say, and I ask a lot, does that make sense? It's just something I've done over the years. So, I feel like I want to talk about this. Does that make sense? And sometimes people go, no, no. And I've had one poor man who his wife sent along,
Yeah.
and he come in, he sat down, he wouldn't look at me, he folded every part of his body, his fingers, his arms, and I just in the end set aside the energy he was giving off and just channeled. And about partway through, he said to me, "Can I uncross everything?" He said, "I really didn't want to give anything away." He said, "My wife made me come here, but you're telling me stuff that you can't possibly be guessing."
Yeah.
So I would say to go in with a certain amount of healthy skepticism is always a good thing. But at
Yep.
the same time, don't go in trying to prove the psychic wrong because you're just wasting their time and your money.
Yep. Yep.
Um, but I do think that there's a certain amount of professionalism that you should expect. I find what I call psychic attack quite upsetting in terms of people asking on behalf of other people information. So, for example, a daughter going in and asking about a mother's step relationship, or now there's a fine line with that because sometimes information about third parties can come up automatically, but it's a real balancing act because the person that's sitting in the room with the psychic has given permission for the reading,
Mm.
but the other person, but then sometimes stuff comes through that you pass over.
Yeah.
So it's I think probably the biggest thing suggestion I could give to people would be to expect a certain amount of ethical behavior.
Yep. Yeah. And that's good. I mean, everyone is different and they do things differently. Like you and I, we don't read cards, but other people read cards, right?
Yeah.
And again, I was speaking to Vanessa's parents today, and Peter asked, "Oh, the tarot, what's that?" And I said, "Look, people who really read the tarot properly are phenomenal.
Yeah,
The
absolutely. Yeah.
depth of symbology and the real meaning behind the tarot. The reason why I gave up because I was just lazy. I didn't want to do it. It was just too complex. That's years of work, right? Not a 10-week course in tarot, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. But if you get on with somebody who really knows the tarot deep down, they are gold. They are great readings, right? But yeah, everyone sort of reads them a little bit differently, and that's the thing, just to be open and see what they say and understand that. I would ask because my style was very forward and it comes from love, but it
Yeah.
strips you bare a lot of the times. And people now when they come to me, it's like you're saying, it's referral based. They go, go and see Greg, but just get ready, just strap
Yeah.
yourself in, right? Because you ain't going to hold back, and not in a bad way. They kind of go just because it's not like any other reading you've ever had before. And people sort of know now. Whereas I said before, in the early days, it was like, this is not what I wanted. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, that's not what I ever did. Never did that in the first place.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think you'll find you attract the sort of client that fits your style as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
I really do. And it's like numerology and astrology. That's amazing. In the hands of the right practitioner,
Yeah.
that can be so informative. And I
Yeah.
think probably the other thing is not taking everything that's said as gospel,
Yes.
because it is malleable and it is open to change. And there's some things in life that the universe expects us to go through because
Mm.
we have to learn and evolve.
Yeah.
And so you may not get any warning about it. Um,
Correct.
so there'll be things where I've had information about financial rewards for clients and it hasn't made sense to them, and then they've come into money because someone's passed, but that
Yeah.
that part didn't come through,
Yeah.
and for obvious reasons. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I think you're right to go in with a certain amount of expectation and skepticism, but at the same time, sort of bearing in mind that it's not the be all and end all.
Yeah. Yep. And the other thing is take action out of it.
Yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
when you this is a guide to help you move forward, right? If you sit on the couch and don't do anything about it, none of it's going to come true.
Yeah.
Um,
And
so
also take responsibility, because it sometimes clients can say, well, the psychic told me to do this. If you're living your life based on the how to book by psychic Joan, that then you're missing the point. It's about
correct.
opening up your awareness to certain things, and yes, sometimes guiding like the medical stuff. But
Yeah.
I think it's a very fine line of balancing, not living your life by it to the letter, and at the same time, listening to what's being told.
Yep. I mean, that's a really, really good point to make about, what information or wisdom or channel, whatever comes to mind. So that's a great tip for people. So if you are looking, again, to go down that path and, just take some of the stuff we've said today and pick the right psychic. I mean, I say to people, don't just go and interview the psychic, go and look at the ones that suit you, right? You don't go and look at a doctor and just take the ordinary doctor out of the, right?
Absolutely. And ask the
They'll,
questions. If they get offended because you're asking, how do you work? Do you use cards? I mean, I use the term psychic aids for tarots only because I
yeah,
don't use them. But like you say, there's some people out there that are brilliant tarot readers.
yeah,
And there are people out there who do Reiki healings and channel at the same time as they're
yeah,
giving a healing. So there's lots of different modalities on offer. But if someone asks me, how long have you been doing it? What do you do? I mean, I first started off doing psychometry where I just held someone's jewelry,
yeah,
but that really was so they thought that I was channeling off something. And then
yeah,
eventually I realized that it's I didn't need it
yeah,
and it wasn't serving them any purpose, so I stopped. But I'm very happy to share with people how I work and what I
yeah,
do. And
yeah,
anyone that isn't, I'd be questioning why.
yeah, yeah. So the hypnotherapy, and this is stuff I love, the hypnotherapy and the psychotherapy, and you've gone well past that. You're into doing masters and stuff like because you're a freak. You're knowledgeable as they come. So tell us about how that complements helping people moving through change, and especially the hypnotherapy, because again, and you know me, I'm not backward and coming forward with stuff and calling a spade a spade. Um, I don't go back. I go forward. I've learnt a version of Tad James. I've regression models. I do past life
Yes.
regression and stuff like that. But my style of hypnotherapy is very much future paced and forward moving. And I will tap into some of the things happen when you were younger and the reasons why, and this is how you got your beliefs and everything. But there's no point staying in there. And when I get people, I again get my whiteboard out or visualize them in front of them and say, "Hey, here's your problem, and this is where you are at the moment. You
Yeah.
can't solve it from down here because you're
Yep.
in the problem. You've got to be up here. So we need to
Absolutely.
shift you first before we tackle this. And if I
Yep.
take you into the past and you've been sexually abused
Yep.
and you're here, it ain't going to work."
Absolutely. And you run the risk of people being
Yeah.
re-traumatized.
Yeah.
So, I know when I was doing my training and there was some timeline therapy, some stuff that came up for people was just horrendous
Yeah.
because of, so I think you're exactly right. It's about, well, Gestalt therapy is very much about that, dealing with the here and now. So
Yeah.
how does that make you feel? And the other thing I would argue is that for change to be meaningful and sustainable, you really need to have an acceptance of the space you're in at the moment, but
Yep.
without judgment. So acceptance and commitment therapy is great with that.
That is
So,
such a good. I
yeah,
love that. I mean, I interviewed a guy named Lawrence Akers during the week, and
yep.
he's very big into that. And it's such a shift for clients in that acceptance part where they just it just is what it is.
Yeah, and it has to genuinely be free of judgment, and also from the therapist's point of view. And I think that actually therapy is very much, I mean, my thesis for the psychotherapy was on the therapeutic alliance. So the therapist has to also sit in a space of non-judgment and unconditional regard for the client in that moment.
Yep.
So sometimes therapists can run the risk of feeling stuck, and so they tell the client, "Well, you're stuck here, we need to," but sometimes it takes the therapist looking within and thinking, well, am I stuck with this client?
Yeah.
So it's a real collaboration and interaction between the two. But I think for clients, one thing I would say is definitely, I mean, I use the term "it is what it is" like a mantra. I feel like I need it tattooed across my forehead, but I genuinely live that in my life. Various challenges within my family and children and things. And that is literally our family's mantra. It's on our whiteboard in our dining room. Because if you can't accept where you're sitting at the moment, it makes it very challenging to move forward.
Yep. Yep. So tell us about your methods, because I'm interested, because people love to hear about how people do things and what works, and
Yeah.
especially these days, you mentioned Bruce Lipton and stuff like that, and I know Joe Dispenza does a lot of this stuff as well too, about really moving forward and using the power of moving forward and a new version, a new identity. Right. The thing is, again, I know use another metaphor for this when I speak to people about stop smoking, and I say, well, this is why stop smoking doesn't work, is because the smoker is still identified with being a smoker. The real shift happens when they become a non-smoker, is when they believe they're a non-smoker. That's it. That is it. That is the therapy.
Absolutely. And honestly, it really comes back to that energy following intent of what we believe we create really
Yeah.
inside us. And look, there's if you have, if someone said to me, well, I didn't create cancer, well, no, that's probably a good argument. There's a genetic link for a lot of cancers.
Yep.
But at the same time, how you move through and progress through treatment is impacted greatly and hugely by your thought patterns
Yeah.
and your attitude. So it really forms the basis of how we really live. So acceptance and commitment therapy talk about living a true and meaningfully value filled life based on your values. So it's about determining what really matters to you. I'm weird in terms of I integrate. I love Ericksonian hypnotherapy.
Yep.
So
So for those people who don't know what Ericksonian is, please explain.
yes. So Ericksonian, Milton Erickson was an amazing man who cured himself of polio. He was a doctor. He was very non-traditional. So he did some dreadful things to people in terms of getting them to move past being stuck.
Would have been sued
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He
multiple
would have been
times.
struck off nowadays. But he was the master of utilization. So he
Yeah.
used what the client presents to him. And that's what so Richard Bandler is probably another example of that. So Richard Bandler is the neuro-linguistic programming practitioner. He's very unorthodox and utilizes what the client presents to him. And so I do a little. So if for a client says to me, I'm drowning here, I will have them visualize being out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and say to them, is there anyone around you throwing you a life raft? And so I will use what they've given me and feed it back to them.
Yeah.
It's the same with even in hypnosis, in trance. I don't use scripts so much. I just feed back what the client's given me, because they are the
Need a
clients
script.
really, absolutely, clients are the vehicle for their own change. They just
Yes.
need a little bit of help in opening the door to tap into their own subconscious. So really, the word facilitator is underestimated, because
Yeah.
really you and I as hypnotherapists are simply facilitators.
We don't heal anything. That's what I keep telling people. We heal shit. We
Yeah,
don't do anything.
no,
And it
that's
was like,
exactly right.
oh, hey, I don't know how you did this. And it's like, I didn't do anything. You've done all the work. I
Yeah,
said a few words.
yeah, absolutely. I think it's that creating that safe therapeutic space though as well. So anxiety is an interesting one.
Now this is something I had another chat to a friend of the other week, and we're talking about stuff, and especially for people who were referred.
Yeah,
I've got the stage now where people come to me that they're already healed
yep. Because making
because
that phone call makes them that they feel like they've, especially if the referral is, this guy's fantastic, he's going to change your life, they're already
they're
saying, "Oh,
done. We're
absolutely."
giving away trade secrets here, right? But
Yeah,
it's such there's such because they come ready, and there's like, um, Joe told me to come and see you, and you fix their marriage and all that kind of stuff, and I haven't fixed them, but and it's like I'm ready. It's like, yeah, you are, but I'm not going to tell you you've already started the work and you've already started the process. I'm just going to sit back and watch what happens, right?
mm,
But that's some of the great stuff by being in that place of setting up the session beforehand, coming in there with that kind of stuff. But I'm going sidetracked here. So yeah, what are some of the other so tell us about, someone comes to see you, is what and don't get away, again, trade secrets, but some of the techniques that you would use to help people move through some of their call them blockages.
and look, in terms of techniques, I'm really happy to share, because I think that um, it's a very much a person-centered thing. So
Yeah. Yep.
certain therapists meet certain, or fit certain people.
Yep.
Um, one thing that I find that I probably, when we do the peer supervision for hypnotherapy, uh, other clinicians will say, well, if you haven't helped that client by 5 sessions, you need to refer them on. I have some clients that I've been seeing for a couple of years,
Yeah.
because I have a little bit of a theory that probably goes against every grain of hypnotherapy and psychotherapy, of dependence leading to independence. So if
Yep.
you've got someone that's really chronically stuck and they feel like no one can help them, but they come each week and they are able to share and get some emotional relief from that,
Yep.
eventually, and my clients are testament to that, eventually they will change. They'll leave an unhappy marriage, or they'll no longer need antidepressant medication, or they'll no longer be suicidal.
Yeah.
So it's about, again, respecting that client space and really offering them a safe environment to be able to do that.
Yep.
Um, so, for example, working with young people who don't want to talk about stuff, you talk about the whiteboard, I'll give them the whiteboard and they'll write their answer to me.
Yeah.
And then eventually they'll be happy, they'll put the whiteboard down and talk to me. And
Yeah.
so I suppose I'm always guided by the client.
Yeah.
Sometimes I love Pat Ogden and Janine Fisher. They do sensory motor work, so the body stuff. I do that a
Yep.
lot. So
Yeah.
someone says, "Oh, I'm feeling so angry." Well, if it was a shape, what shape would it be? It's always jagged,
Yep.
triangle, square, rectangle. It's never a circle or smooth.
What color is it?
Yeah, absolutely. What color, if it sat in your body. And again, that ego therapy stuff, the ego state of, if you were
Yep.
sitting in the middle of it, what would it feel like?
Yep.
And clients give you the most amazing responses. They,
Mm.
they really know what they need deep down. It's just about opening it up for them. So
Yeah.
I will say that probably one of the biggest challenges is clients who are really feel depressed, are on heavily medicated for depression.
Yep.
That can be a challenge. And I'm definitely, if I feel like there's clients that, quite often I will refer them on to go to the GP, go to a psychiatrist, and then
Yep.
invariably they come back to me and the psychiatrist or the medical practitioner at the same time.
Yeah. Quite often I find that the client makes a change in the first 5 sessions, but after that, it's an accountability partner.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
And it's just to be, okay, well, I've done this, I've left the relationship, but what do I do now?
yeah,
Where's
yeah.
my identity? And it becomes Yeah, that, so it's not, um, and it's not that you're stringing them along anyway. It's just the fact that that first phase is you've got them through that, but now they're left with, well, who am I?
Absolutely. That's actually a huge thing. And I'm finding more and more clients coming to seek support for that very question.
Yeah,
Even if they are in an unhappy relationship or an unhappy work situation, who am I? What matters to me? And I think that's growing. It seems over the
it's
last 5 or 6 years to be really something people are they want to work on themselves and be their very best person.
And that's one of my first questions I ask in my intake. It's like, who are you? And they'll go and list all their things out, and I'm this, I'm this, I'm this,
Yeah.
I'm this, I'm this, and then I'm just going, right, they're all external.
Yeah. Well, that's what you do for a
What do you
living.
do for a living?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
is absolutely.
yeah. Or I'm a dad, and they've
Yeah,
written I'm a dad, not I'm a freaking awesome dad. I play with my kids and I do this and I take them here and I take them there. I'm a dad, but they can list all the other things out that there's wrong with them as well too, right? But it's so
absolutely.
so I find, this went back to one of my original questions. I think we're sort of answering here in a roundabout way. Is a lot of people have this search for who am I?
Yeah, definitely. It's I think probably it's at the core out of a lot of mental health issues.
Mm,
Certainly at the core of some personality disorder, say borderline personality disorder,
yep.
that struggling for sense of self-identity. I love the solution focused counseling technique of the miracle question. If you went to bed tonight and a miracle happened overnight and you woke up in the morning and the problem solved, how do you feel different? How do you speak different? What's different? What's changed? And
Yep.
people will often give you a different answer to the reason as to why they sought therapy in the first place.
Yeah.
So it's what they feel like they came in to address is not the underlying core issues.
Do you do a lot of education with people? Like I find that a lot of it is, theory based stuff, and going, hey, here's a
Yeah,
bunch of education you need, because to help you move through this, you need to have the theory behind it in a way to go, okay, well, you know, you can change, but there's no point changing without understanding why or how.
absolutely. And I think that the psychoeducation is so important. So,
Yeah.
for example, if I'm talking to treating an adolescent and I'm dealing with helping the mum to try and understand where this young person's coming from, I'll explain about the amygdala and the limbic system of the brain, and how if you're in that warfare state, that emotional warfare state, you can't resolve anything in that space.
No, and that's something that, and that's why I get a little bit shitty about the education side of things, is that you and I are blessed, right? And I'm still an ordinary parent some days. Like, I am horrible. Like, it's just like, seriously, Oscar, go to sleep. But, and we do the best we can. But I've got such a massive leap on everybody else, because
Yeah.
I know this. The rest of the population trying to parent in a way that they don't have any of this stuff, right? How hard is it to parent without that knowledge?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it needs to be taught at such a core level. I mean, my kids will definitely tell you that I'm not the world's best parent, and they hold me accountable constantly. And they will say things like, that was manipulative, mum, but I love that because I go, yep, I
Yep.
own that. But I agree. I know that if the kids are dysregulated, me dysregulating doesn't help at all.
So give us a bit of an example about a conversation with a parent, and that's because this is great. We're giving away tips and tricks about if someone's just gone, what are you talking about? The frontal cortex, the amygdala. You've just lost me. You had me up until then, and you talked about fight or flight and anything. Because I say to people, anything, and so I've got my I've done my level 2 in Gottman method. All right,
Oh,
so
yep.
and so they always talk about anything above 100 beats per minute. Stop the conversation.
Yeah,
Because you
absolutely.
are you are in your emotional state, and you're going to say some horrible shit from that place,
Yeah.
and no one's listening. Everyone's trying to shout over each other, and there is no solution. And go back away, get your heart rate down to 70, 80, then have a conversation. Watch you go up again, stop the conversation. But anyway, so
Absolutely. So if you look at the way the brain develops, it's from the primitive brain, so the brain stem up to the emotional brain, the limbic, and then the prefrontal cortex, so our thinking brain, the
Yep.
wise owl. I describe it as, and I think it's Dan Siegel, I'm probably misquoting there, but it talks about the wise owl and the barking dog. So with my kids, for example, if they have exam anxiety, I tell them you don't want the barking dog sitting the exam, you want the wise owl sitting it. And it's the same with parents. You don't want to be fighting with a 14-year-old if you're both in barking dog state.
Mm.
So you can, and you can feel it. It's that fight, flight, freeze. So when your heart feels like it's starting to race, you can feel your body temperature rising, your inner core rising, voices elevate, and you can just feel the energy is combative rather than mediation. And
Yeah.
so I think that's, and look, it's a really hard thing for parents. You know, you're in that space of, I'm the parent, I told you to go to bed, go to bed.
Yep.
But sometimes it's about, and some of the tips I say to parents, especially with teenagers, when they yell, whisper, because if you break the pattern and you do something they really don't expect, it sort of shocks them back into, oh, hold on a minute, mum's not fighting back. That's not the
Yeah.
way this works.
Yeah.
Um, doesn't always work, but it's a
That is
or
right.
letting the young person go to their room and retreat. And I'm
Yeah.
talking more, I suppose, teenagers, but toddlers are probably an example of that as well. I think we've forgotten that these young people from a really young age feel the intensity of emotions that adults do, but they have trouble regulating it. So an example would be, I remember my youngest, when she was about 3 or 4, had to have some medical tests, and they didn't put a gown on her and they didn't close the window, the curtain. And I said to them, she's really feeling uncomfortable. Can you close the curtain? And they looked at me and she said to me, I'm really embarrassed. But we don't think that kids feel those
Yeah.
things. So I think it's about, and again, it comes back to that trying to be in the other person's space, of trying to think what's going on for them right now. What are
Yeah.
they, how are they experiencing this moment?
Yep.
Um,
And
and sometimes,
it's
yeah,
different for like you and I. I'm in my 40s. I'm not going to tell anybody how old you are. You're
yeah,
young, 20s.
really old.
Right.
Dinosaurs walking the planet on.
We didn't have mobile phones when I was in high school,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Well, put it this way,
Now,
I used a telex. That's showing.
right. Yes. Google it, people.
Yeah.
Google it. And it's one of those things now where you got instant gratification for these kids, and they've got TikTok, which is horrendous, Instagram, which is fake as hell, right? But everyone's trying to be this thing that's unrealistic. And parents that never went through that as children really are struggling as well too, to deal with a whole new wave of social media and being taught about instant gratification, and your value is based on your TikTok video and your popularity and what you look like from the outside. And we never dealt with that.
No.
Well, we did, but not like it is today.
I think I think there's two sides of that too. I mean, I'm definitely of the generation where, in terms of my youngest doesn't have TikTok, doesn't have Instagram. I mean, she's only 12,
Yep.
but it's not something. Well, for a number of reasons. A, because I didn't have it growing up, but I also feel uncomfortable with sometimes the unreal or the inauthentic. Um, Versions of people that are presented. And
Yeah.
I see that from the psychic point of view, because I
Yeah.
know what's on Facebook and Instagram isn't what's going on for in reality for those people. Sometimes that makes it harder for them because they've got to keep up that up. I
Yeah.
must admit, I love the fact there's a little bit of a shift with that, of people getting a bit more real in that space.
Yep.
But I also, so I was recently at a venue and I was watching a young mum taking a photo of her. Oh, she was probably about 2. And the little girl was cute and smiling. And mum said, don't smile like that. Do it like this. And I thought that's really sad because
Yeah.
this young person is learning from a really young age that what goes on this Instagram or Facebook post is really important.
Yeah.
So and look, I'm probably not an expert to be able to speak in that space, but
Yep.
just as a parent of 3 children, it's something that has caused me some challenges. And I come back always to, who do you want to be represented as a person in that space?
And it kind of said that thing we said before, who am I?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
And
think it's I know that for young people, their phone is their identity.
yeah,
So if you have parents that try to take their phone away, and then they say to me, they just completely melted down.
yeah,
Sometimes that as a punishment is actually far more detrimental. So it's about negotiating with the young person. And look, I think it's a really complicated and complex
yeah,
space.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's, it's such a, let's say, simple but complex solution. The question is very simple about who am I and how do I get there? And I say people, well, it's an inside reflection about finding the true, true path is inside you. Well, how do I do it? How do I get there? It's, oh, okay, right. You're looking at destination again, right? It's a place of being. It's a place of presence. You can't get there. You can't drive there.
yeah,
You can only be there. And again, you watch their eyes roll over and you think, oh, I've lost them again, right? Because people want this, I was speaking to a good friend of mine during the week and they were talking about, they've seen this video come about the 6 levels to ascension, right? I went, oh,
yeah,
6 levels to ascension. Are we talking again about trying to get somewhere, right? Where just,
yeah.
shift your awareness. And
Absolutely.
some people call it, is that all it is? It's like, yeah, but it's more complex than that. But in the basic side of things, shifting your awareness. But yeah, and where we see things from the psychic things is it's the thing about, well, I'm not happy where I am.
Yeah. And it is that thing of just being present. I went through, my mother-in-law had dementia, and it was the most amazing experience in some way, because all that mattered was the present moment.
Mm,
So, and she was just a delightful lady, but she would, do it, just mattered about right here and now. And
yeah,
in some ways, I mean, I say that coming from a Queenslander who didn't spend weeks in lockdown like poor Victoria, but COVID afforded some people that. The amount of
yeah,
my clients that said, actually, I've really enjoyed COVID and having to be forced into lockdown because it's taken all the busyness away. It's
mm,
allowed me to reflect on what really matters to me.
correct.
So I think it's that thing of, like you say, just who am I? Who do I need to be in this space, rather than always looking outward? I often say to people, if you have severe depression or anxiety, it sounds weird, but I tell them to imagine their eyeballs turning outward, because when you're self-reflecting and self-deprecating, your eyeballs are turned inward. You look
Yeah,
at what's wrong with me, what's going on. So
yeah,
it's just a matter of shifting, literally shifting your focus.
yeah. So how do you, and say someone's got this thing about, well, I don't want to go inward because I don't like the person inside. I'm validating myself outside because what's inside is dark and I don't want to go there. How do you help, people shift that and go in and
That's
tackle that?
actually a challenge. And I think young people are my best clients at challenging me with that,
Yep.
because I'll say to them, look, I think you have beautiful eyes, or you're really creative, you're this, and they'll go, and I'll say to them as I'm listing it off, I'll look at them and I'll say, you don't believe a word of what I've just said, do you? And they go, no.
Oh,
And so we start with, there's always something that someone knows that they're good at. So the young person I'm thinking about was very kind, so that was our starting point. I'm kind, I have empathy, I love, XYZ. So I think but that's probably self-esteem and self-worth is the biggest challenge for therapists, I think.
yeah. Yep. And that's a difficult thing, because there's not one model that actually, here's your fix for it, right? And that's the beauty about what you do. You've got a bucket load of stuff you can just adapt to the person. And like you said before, the person who presents in front of you is the solution. And if you follow where they want to go and you ask a few questions that are on the money, um, you can really get there. I'm interested to know about your hypnotherapy because I get the feeling that your hypnotherapy is a lot of conversational stuff rather than going and trancing me out,
Yeah,
kind
look,
of stuff, right?
I don't think I've used uh,
Induction.
an induction or an eye catalepsy, or from probably about 6 months after I trained. It's very conversational. The only time I haven't been able to be successful putting someone into a trance is a person with severe anxiety, and
Yep.
they just felt trapped. So we would work, but even then, I would use hypnotic. So I would say, see if you can, imagine if you will, feel if you
So
like.
that's a really important thing. You've said the word that you use mostly conversational. So for people
Yep.
listening, you're not lying on the chair and you're out to it as people perceive that hypnotherapy is, which it's not. You're actually having a conversation, like you and I are having a conversation here, but you're in a hypnotic trance. Explain that.
So we're in trances every day. I mean, I've done it in school holidays, going to drive the kids to school when I meant to have turned right. So we get in trances daily. So it's about, um, I, without sort of giving away to my clients what I do, I change the tone of my voice
Yep.
slightly and the speed of my voice. And then I will just get them to focus on, say, for example, the tight feeling in their chest, or the heaviness of carrying burdens in their shoulders, and we work
Yep.
from there. But they're quite, I mean, and 9 out of 10 times they're sitting in a hypnotherapy chair, laid back, comfortable, but sometimes
Yeah.
they're sitting opposite in the chair because they've got a bad back or they don't like that
Yeah.
chair.
Yeah.
um, and the amount of times I've had mums sit in who say to me, oh, I nearly zoned out then. If they're sitting in with a young person while I'm doing the session with them, I think that it's about, again, just feeding back to the client those words. And I do have music playing in the background, but it's just really low key, soft music, and
Yep.
that's just to break up the difference between the session of talking, move over, and I call it the change chair, actually.
Yep.
So I say,
Yep.
are you ready to, coming to sit in the change chair? And sometimes
Yep.
people say no. It doesn't mean they're not changing in the other chair, but
No.
I think it's half the time I couldn't tell you what I've said to the client. If you said to me, what did you just say? I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Yep. Yep.
So, I think that it's that thing of you get it. And Richard Bandler's a good one for this. If you watch him work, he taps his foot and you could almost see him being in a trance at
Yeah.
the same time. And I will sometimes do that. I will swing my chair as I'm talking and I realize that it's coming in time with my voice.
Yeah. I use my pen. I
Yeah.
flick
Yeah.
my pen on my fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's good because people have to realize those change doesn't have to be, difficult or hard or go back and re-talk about the stuff over and over and over again. That therapy is dead. It's gone. Having to sit there and talk about your trauma for 3 weeks, 4 weeks about who did what and how did what, that's very old school stuff, right? And what you're doing, Tina, and why I love what work you do is because it's progressive.
Yeah.
It's got you.
Also, a little bit subtle. It's like craniosacral therapy. If anyone's
Yeah.
ever had craniosacral therapy, it's very gentle. People often feel like, well, what did you just do to me? But you get off feeling the table feeling $1,000,000.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be this. And you're so right about sort of it puts us in our cognitive space when we talk over and over and over again about the problem. And that's the
Yeah.
other thing, is focusing on the solution, not and the medical model traditionally in psychology is problem focused. It's
Yes.
changing with the likes of Russ Harrison, acceptance and commitment therapy,
Yep.
but it's primarily being problem focused.
Yeah. Yep. And it's great. I mean, it's sometimes you take your clients kicking and screaming, right? It's like, hey, we're not talking about it. It's like, I know you want to sit there and blame your mum for the last 15 years,
Yeah.
but it ain't doing any good.
Yeah.
You're just wasting your money here.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And eventually they get bored of it. It's, oh, Greg, you're going to, seriously. You're like Darren Beeman riding Maccabi Deeber in the cup, right? Get off my back, right?
Yeah.
All right, finally. Okay, right. I will look about the future. And as you can see this, right. And you can just see that the weight of the world just lifts, just drops away. You can see reading body language and stuff like that. You can see it. You see it in their eyes. They go, okay, right, I can see it, see a solution here. And sometimes it's difficult to get people to let go of the past because, it is their identity. It's giving them excuses. It's giving them reasons why things haven't worked. And when you come from
Yeah.
that, like I said, that no judgment perspective, like, I don't care what you've done.
Yeah.
It's what you do from now on in that I care about.
And it's really important too, I think, to acknowledge that point that all behavior has a function. It serves a function, whether it's dysfunctional or functional.
Yeah.
But sometimes clients aren't ready or fearful of changing that because they've been carrying this. There's a wonderful metaphor and story about a monk and two monks crossing a river, and there was a woman that needed to get to the other side. And in this story, monks are not supposed to touch women. One piggybacked her to the other side of the river. And they're
Yep.
walking along, and the monk says to the other one, "Why are you so depressed and down, so despondent?" And he said, "Well, I picked that woman up and I carried her." And he said, "Yes, the difference between that is I would have left her on the other side of the bank. You're still carrying her." And that thing of we carry
Yeah.
this idea of who we're meant to be, and sometimes it's introjected from parents, especially.
Yeah.
You're useless. You can't do it. You'll never achieve anything. So I think it's important to acknowledge that sometimes clients aren't ready to change with that quickly.
Yeah. I love what you said there, learned behavior. This is another thing that I would love the education to be able to help, um, unlock some of this behavioral patterns that people do. And when I say that, one, it's happening subconsciously. So you've got no control over it to a certain point. And two, you're doing it because you think it's giving you a positive outcome.
Absolutely. Even say, for example, anxiety. If you have social anxiety and you avoid social situations, there's a positive, well, it's actually called a negative reinforcement because you're avoiding the anxiety by staying away from that situation.
Yeah.
And so I think that people, again, come back to that fear thing. It's too fearful for them to have to face that to then make the change. So
Yeah.
it's the therapist's job is to support them in helping them just acknowledge the possibilities or probabilities.
Yeah.
Erickson was a great one in that of, just imagine how you'll feel different when XYZ has happened.
I would have loved to have been someone rock up to Ericsson and going, "Hey, dude, you're in a wheelchair. What are you doing this stuff?" And
There's a wonderful video of him. It's really old and croaky where he's trying to get arm catalepsy and he's telling the woman to raise her arm up and she doesn't. So he just lifts it up. Like utilization at its best.
but and that's and we, the confidence that comes from doing stuff is great. So, look, I've really loved this. I think there's a great lot of stuff in here for people who are, the first part from the psychic side of things, the second part, especially the therapy side, there's some great, tips and tricks in here. For listeners, if someone is just at the stage where they have that question about who am I and my identity and things aren't going well, what's some of the things that they can do by themselves that will maybe start to shift the pattern that they've got?
I think probably the first step I would say would be that acceptance of acknowledging the space they're in at the moment, free of judgment. So, and Australians are quite bad at the tall poppy syndrome.
Yep.
So that thing of just accepting that what you're doing at that moment. I mean, I love Louise Hay, but that, your parents did the best they could at the time with what they had. Well, sometimes that's just bollocks.
Yeah.
So I think that acknowledging that things are the way they, and it depends on the context, because if you've got someone, say, in an abusive relationship, it really is individual for each person. But I think in moving forward with change, this is going to sound strange, but listen to your body. Your
Yeah.
body tells you that something's not right. So for the amount of times that people have said to me, I just had a gut feeling that this was going to happen with the relationship, or I've been pushed to be an engineer but my heart really tells me to go and be a doctor.
Yep.
Your body always gives you hints that something's not right. The other
Yep.
thing is listen to your intuition, because everyone is psychic. It's just some people fine tune the radio antenna a little bit better than others.
Yep.
I really, truly believe that. I think that everyone has a sixth sense, a natural intuition, and we've moved away from listening to that. And sometimes it's because, listening to the intuition is going to take you down a path you don't want to go.
Yep.
Um, but I think that's probably, they're two things that I think people can actively do for themselves.
Yep.
And I mean what I'm about to say next with the most compassion and empathy, but stop being a victim. Because
Now,
that's
interesting with that. So I read a post during the week about victim shaming.
Yeah.
And there's this whole teaching, and I agree, I completely agree. There's too many victims that people just will push this wheelbarrow of victimhood and they'll shove it down your throat, right? And but this whole new thing about, well, we can't shame victims. If you start calling them out and being a victim, you're victim shaming. And it's, it's a big agenda with some things these days, especially with, being all politically correct with some things. You can't call out some stuff, right? How do you get around that victim? Because the word, I can say, when I say it to people, like they get it, because we've done some other things around there first, to get to the point of understanding about they're causing all this stuff to happen to themselves, right? How do you get around that
I think
word?
And when I say that, I mean that. So I'm not talking about victims of, say, sexual assault. I'm talking about people that are in the poor me, why me, this isn't fair. I'm
Yeah.
talking about that space of, like you said, when you were if you're talking to a client about, well, this happened to me as a child. And, and there's a fine line here between acknowledging trauma. I absolutely acknowledge trauma, sexual assault, all of that space. Here I'm talking about something different, where every relationship I've been in has dissolved, and everyone treats me badly. My mother doesn't talk to me. My 3 ex-husbands think I'm dreadful. And I don't understand why, because I'm not negative, and the body language shuts down. And
Not negative. Have you just heard what you've said for the last 15 minutes? You're not negative.
yeah, that's it. So
I'm going to replay it back to you.
that's what I mean when I talk about stop being the victim, and taking
Yep.
charge and control of your own life, of your own destiny, of your own path, and acknowledging the role other people have played. Now, when I say that, as I said, I'm definitely not talking about the space of PTSD or sexual assault, or there's a
Domestic
word.
violence or anything like that.
Yeah, I think we've taken the word victim belongs in those spaces. Those people
Absolutely.
are genuine victims. I'm talking about the space of people that don't want to take responsibility for changing what's going on with them.
And that is a perfect answer, really perfect answer, because it was like, oh God, we're all lumping these words in with massive generalizations of stuff, right? And like you've worded it perfectly there about people who actually have the ability, but they're just choosing a different outcome. Whereas that there are,
We're minimizing the impact of that word victim, which belongs in a space where those people really deserve, oh my God, sort of response, as opposed to, it's an interesting one, and that's just my take on it. So
no, it's great. Yeah, no,
telling you off
perfect answer.
for the comment there.
But it's a perfect answer, because majority of my clients I see, poor me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's an easy space to sit in sometimes, and depending on the context around it, it can be hard to get unstuck from it. But I really truly believe that it's not impossible to move out of that space. And I also genuinely believe that your upbringing does not write your destiny.
Yeah.
The beginning of the book does not write the end of it.
No.
I genuinely believe that. This thing about obstacles for people getting on in life, I think a lot of the time we're our own obstacle. And again, that sort of takes some clarification around people that, say, have home security issues or financial security issues. I'm talking about the mainstream general space there.
Yeah. And it's funny because some of the people I've seen in really abusive situations, if I would actually give them the word, hey, you're a victim, you're like, hey, don't you use that word around me.
That's the difference. It's some people just will not. They have this sort of fighter mentality of, don't you feel sorry for me? I might be sharing my story with you, but I don't want your sympathy.
Yeah.
And that's matter of fact, sharing the story. So
Yeah.
there's a real difference there with it.
Yeah, and that's funny. Like you and I can talk about it, because obviously seeing the clients, we can say, okay, here's what's really going on. The real victims being victims, and the ones that aren't victims are being, and they're the ones pushing the buttons. Go, no, you can't victim shame, right? Going up. I want to finish on a positive. Okay, for people who want to know more about subconscious mind, conscious mind, the amygdala, the brain, how that works, how to be able to, what some of the things that they can sort of look at from a to take that step to get more education on some of this stuff?
There's some really, really good books out there. Dan Siegel is fantastic in terms of sort of the barking dog and the wise owl sort of scenarios. He does some great work, some great books with children's
Yep.
stuff that's directed at children. I think there's uh, The Happiness Trap by Russ Harris is an amazing book about sort of acceptance and not sitting in that space of judgment.
Hmm.
But I think probably the biggest thing that I would suggest for people is trying to learn about the connection between the subconscious mind and the conscious, and how much impact the subconscious mind has. I mean, if you use Freud, was a bit of a nutcase, really. Um,
Yeah.
but despite the fact that he was a nutcase and most of his research was done on a handful of case studies,
Yep.
this thing of the ego, the id, and the superego, it still exists in psychology textbooks today. There's
Yeah.
something to it.
Yeah.
Jung talks about the shadow self. He's got some great books, but they're a bit heavy going.
Yep.
Um, and there's some really good TED Talks and podcasts on things about the subconscious brain. And um, I think there's some really interesting videos of Richard Bandler working, and
Yep.
it's they're really good examples of how powerful the subconscious mind can be. So the other one is Darren Brown. I mean, I've seen him convince someone that their car was black and not red.
I've
You know,
actually got, let me see, behind the screen here somewhere. There's a book by Darren Brown. Let's hope it doesn't fall over. People can see. That is an awesome book.
yep.
For you guys watching on YouTube, you'll see it. For you guys listening on the podcast, it's Darren Brown's Happy Book. Right?
He, he's
It,
amazing at
yeah,
demonstrating the power in a very real way.
yeah,
And the book by Bruce Lipton, The Biology of Belief, it's a really good book.
yep,
It's, I think taking little steps like just even engaging in mindfulness meditation, or just sitting quietly in a space of, say, a candle meditation where you've got a candle lit, you're watching the candle. People always talk about having this busy mind, they can't turn their chatter off. I meditate and I've got, oh God, I forgot the washing, I haven't got the bread. So keeping the mind chatter sort of at bay, but not trying to get rid of it.
yeah, yep, yeah, exactly. And I look, they're all fantastic. I would love one day you and I to sit down and talk about the shadow. I think there's another podcast in that, because I'm fascinated with the shadow side. And I have, obviously, you and I will have a very, very similar take on it as far as the shadow's your gift, right? So we'll do it another time. But
Yeah, absolutely.
Tina, thank you very much for tonight. Very much appreciated. We've gone way over time, which is probably what I expected anyway. There is some bad news though, is that you're not taking any more clients on because you are so full that you don't see any new clients. So I would usually say, hey guys, I'll put Tina's links down below and you can get in touch with her. I'll still do that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So at the
you
moment,
are
no
fully
new
booked.
clients. Yeah, fully
You are
booked.
doing. You are so fully booked, and which is good one way, but bad another way. But
Absolutely.
is that you can't even get in to see her, and that's the beauty of her having her on here, is being able to share her knowledge and wisdom, and impart some stuff on here. So if you really want to hear more from Tina along the way, I'm sure if you come back on and share some
Absolutely.
some knowledge and wisdom about some of the stuff that you're doing, and especially the shadow stuff and some of the more stuff on the children and all that kind of thing. But yeah, sorry people,
Happy to come back and chat anytime, Greg. It's been awesome.
All right, Tina. So thank you very much. Guys listening to this, we'll put some links down below. If you want to look at the subscribe button, whichever way it is on the side, thank you very much. Subscribe to the podcast or subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'd love to hear comments and share some of the feedback from listening to Tina tonight. And then we'll see you on the next episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Potential. See you guys.
Thanks, Greg.